The cold spring wind stung Victoria Evans' tear-streaked face as she stood alone at the altar, her white-knuckled hand clutching her small bouquet of wilting wildflowers. The other pressed protectively against the small swell of her belly beneath the hastily altered wedding dress. It was 1873 in Wheatland, Wyoming territory, and the church had never felt so silent, so suffocating. Victoria's chest heaved as she struggled to breathe through the crushing humiliation. Nearly everyone in the small frontier town was there to witness her shame. Benjamin Holloway, her fiancé of 6 months and father of her unborn child, had simply not shown up. "I think we've waited long enough," Reverend Miller said softly, his weathered face pinched with sympathy. "Perhaps we should." The church doors swung open with a thunderous bang. Victoria's heart leapt to her throat, hope flaring briefly before dying just as quickly. It wasn't Benjamin striding down the aisle toward her. It was Brennan Blackett, his expression grim beneath the shadow of his wide-brimmed hat. Brennan was known throughout the Wyoming territory as one of the finest horse trainers in the West. He owned a modest ranch outside of town and kept mostly to himself, though Victoria had exchanged pleasantries with him on the occasions their paths crossed. Now his tall frame moved with purpose down the aisle, boots echoing on the wooden floor. Murmurs rippled through the congregation as he approached. Victoria stood frozen, mortification washing over her in waves. Of all the people to witness her abandonment, why did it have to be the stoic, respected Brennan Blackett? To her shock, he didn't stop at a pew. He continued straight to the altar, removed his hat, and faced her. His blue eyes, usually cool and reserved, now burned with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Miss Evans," he said, loud enough for the entire church to hear, "I know I'm not the man you expected today, but I won't let you stand here alone." Victoria blinked in confusion. "Mr. Blackett, I don't. That coward isn't coming," he said, his voice dropping so only she and the Reverend could hear. "And you don't deserve this." Then, to her utter astonishment, Brennan Blackett extended his hand. "If you'll have me, I'd be honored to stand in his place." The church fell silent. Victoria stared at his outstretched hand, her mind reeling. Was this some cruel joke? But the unwavering sincerity in his eyes told her it wasn't. "Why?" she whispered. "Because no decent man would leave a woman carrying his child at the altar," he replied quietly. "And because you deserve better than that." Victoria glanced around at the sea of faces watching her, some sympathetic, others judgmental. Her parents had passed away 2 winters ago in a typhoid outbreak. She had no family here, only the small dress shop she'd opened with her meager inheritance. If she walked out of this church unwed and with child, her business would surely fail. No one would patronize a fallen woman. With trembling fingers, Victoria placed her hand in Brennan's larger, calloused one. It was warm and steady, unlike her own. "Very well," she said, her voice barely audible. Reverend Miller looked between them, confusion evident on his face. "Mr. Blackett, do you understand what you're proposing? Marriage is a sacred covenant before God." "I understand perfectly, Reverend," Brennan replied without hesitation. "I'm prepared to honor those vows today and every day hereafter." The Reverend nodded slowly. "And Miss Evans, are you certain this is what you want?" No, of course it wasn't what she wanted. She had dreamed of marrying for love, not convenience or charity. But dreams were luxuries that pregnant, abandoned women couldn't afford in 1873. "Yes," she said, straightening her shoulders. "I am certain." And so it was that Victoria Evans became Victoria Blackett on that brisk spring day, married to a virtual stranger while carrying another man's child. As they turned to face the stunned congregation as husband and wife, Victoria wondered if she had just made the biggest mistake of her life, or if somehow, impossibly, salvation had walked through those church doors in the form of a quiet cowboy with unfathomable blue eyes. The short ride to Brennan's ranch passed in uncomfortable silence. Victoria sat stiffly beside her new husband in his wagon, her wedding dress sewn with such hope and love now feeling like a costume in some bizarre theater production. The Wyoming landscape stretched before them, the rolling prairie dotted with sagebrush and the distant mountains standing sentinel against the clear blue sky. "My home isn't grand," Brennan finally said as they approached a modest 2-story house nestled against a backdrop of cottonwood trees. "But it's solid," Built it myself 3 years ago. It's lovely, Victoria replied automatically, though she barely registered the sight. Her mind was still in the church, still processing the whirlwind events that had transformed her life in the span of an hour. The ranch house was indeed solidly built, with a wide front porch and large windows. A barn and corral stood nearby, where several horses grazed peacefully. It was a far cry from the small room above her dress shop where she had been living since her parents' passing. Brennan helped her down from the wagon, his touch impersonal but gentle. He carried her single hastily packed suitcase, all she had managed to gather before the wedding, into the house. "I'll fetch the rest of your belongings tomorrow," he said, setting her case down in the entryway. "Thank you," Victoria murmured, taking in her new surroundings. The interior was surprisingly comfortable, with simple but quality furniture. A stone fireplace dominated one wall of the main room, and a large wooden table sat in what appeared to be a dining area. It was clean and well kept, defying the bachelor stereotype. "Would you like to sit?" Brennan gestured to a chair. "You must be tired." Victoria nodded, grateful to take the weight off her feet. Her hands instinctively went to her belly, now almost 4 months along. Brennan removed his hat and coat, hanging them on pegs by the door. With his tall frame no longer hidden beneath the heavy coat, Victoria could see the lean strength in his shoulders and arms, the build of a man who worked with powerful animals daily. "I imagine you have questions," he said, taking a seat across from her. Victoria gave a humorless laugh. "That would be putting it mildly, Mr. Blackett." "Brennan," he corrected gently. "I think we're well past formalities now." "Brennan," she repeated, the name feeling foreign on her tongue. "Why did you do it? Why would you marry a woman carrying another man's child, a woman you barely know?" He considered her question, his expression thoughtful. "I've lived in Wheatland for 5 years now. I've seen how this town treats women in your situation. I couldn't stand by and watch them destroy you. So it was pity then." The word tasted bitter. "No," he said firmly. "Respect. You've built something for yourself here. That dress shop of yours has become essential to the women in town. You've worked hard and conducted yourself with dignity. You didn't deserve what Holloway did to you." Victoria felt tears threatening again and blinked them back. She had cried enough today. "That still doesn't explain why you would bind yourself to me legally. You could have offered help without marriage." Brennan leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "We both know that wouldn't have been enough. This town, this territory doesn't make allowances for unwed mothers. Your business would have failed. You would have been ostracized." He paused. "And the child deserves a name." The mention of her baby made Victoria's throat tighten. Benjamin's betrayal had been complete, not only abandoning her but their unborn child as well. "I'm not looking to replace Holloway," Brennan continued. "I don't expect anything from you that you're not willing to give. This can be a marriage in name only, if that's what you prefer." Victoria studied him, trying to reconcile the man before her with the impulsive decision he had made. Brennan Blackett had always seemed so reserved, so self-contained. Yet today he had acted with a boldness that contradicted everything she thought she knew about him. "I still don't understand," she said. "What do you gain from this arrangement?" Something flickered in his eyes, something vulnerable that vanished almost as quickly as it appeared. "Not everything in life is about gain, Victoria." She noticed he had used her first name, and strangely, it didn't feel presumptuous. "I think we should be honest with each other from the start," she said. "This marriage may have begun under unusual circumstances, but I intend to be a good wife to you. I'll keep your house, cook your meals, and do what I can to make this a real home." "And I'll be a good husband," he replied. "I'll provide for you and the child, respect you, and offer protection. I've prepared the second bedroom upstairs for you. It has its own stove, so you'll be comfortable even on cold nights." Victoria nodded, grateful for his consideration. "Thank you, I'm still processing all of this." Understandably, he stood up. "You must be hungry. Let me fix you something to eat." As he moved toward what she assumed was the kitchen, Victoria called after him, "Benjamin might return, you know, when he realizes what he's done." Brennan paused in the doorway, his profile silhouetted against the afternoon light. "If he does, he'll find that you're married to a man who wouldn't dream of leaving you at the altar." With that, he disappeared into the kitchen, leaving Victoria alone with her thoughts and the strange new reality that she was now Mrs. Brennan Blackett. The next morning, Victoria woke disoriented in the unfamiliar bedroom. Sunlight streamed through curtains she hadn't hung, warming a quilt she hadn't made. For one blissful moment, she forgot the events of the previous day. Then reality crashed over her like a bucket of cold water. Benjamin had abandoned her at the altar. She was now married to Brennan Blackett, and she was still carrying a child. She dressed quickly in one of the few day dresses that still fit her changing figure, noting that she would need to make new clothes soon. When she descended the stairs, she found the main room empty but heard movement from the kitchen. Following the sound, she discovered Brennan at the stove, frying bacon. "Good morning," he said, glancing over his shoulder. "I hope you slept well." "Well enough, thank you," she replied, surprised by the domestic scene. "You didn't have to cook breakfast. That's my responsibility now. You were sleeping soundly, seemed ashamed to wake you after such a trying day." He transferred bacon to 2 plates where scrambled eggs already waited. "Coffee's hot if you'd like some." Victoria poured herself a cup, oddly touched by his thoughtfulness. They ate in companionable silence until Brennan spoke. "I thought we might go into town today. You'll need your things from the dress shop, and I imagine you'll want to continue your business." Victoria set down her fork. "You'd allow that. Many husbands wouldn't want their wives working." "I'm not many husbands," he replied simply. "The shop is yours, you built it. I see no reason why marriage should change that." Relief flooded through her. Her little shop had been her lifeline after her parents' deaths, giving her purpose and independence. "Thank you. That means a great deal to me." After breakfast, they rode into Wheatland. Victoria braced herself for the gossip and stares that would inevitably follow yesterday's dramatic events. Sure enough, as they made their way down the main street, heads turned and whispers followed. Mrs. Peterson, the banker's wife, crossed to the other side of the street rather than pass them directly. Victoria felt her cheeks burn with humiliation. "Hold your head high," Brennan murmured beside her. "You've done nothing wrong." His words gave her strength as they continued to her shop and the small apartment above it. The closed sign remained in the window from the day before, when she'd left early to prepare for her wedding. Inside, the familiar scent of fabric and beeswax welcomed her. Bolts of calico, gingham, and muslin lined the shelves. A half-finished dress for Mrs. Mayer stood on the dressmaker's dummy in the corner. This place had been her sanctuary, her achievement. Now it felt tinged with the memory of Benjamin's betrayal. "I'll need to pack everything from upstairs," she said, trying to focus on practical matters. Brennan nodded. "Take your time, I have some business at the mercantile. I'll return in an hour to help with the heavier items." Once alone, Victoria climbed the narrow stairs to her small apartment. She moved methodically around the room, gathering her clothes, books, and personal belongings. When she reached the small drawer where she'd kept mementos of her courtship with Benjamin pressed flowers, a handkerchief he'd given her, notes they'd exchanged, she hesitated. After a moment's deliberation, Victoria took the entire drawer to the stove and lit a match. One by one, she fed the items to the flames, watching as they curled and blackened. The past was gone. Whatever future awaited her now would be built on new foundations. She was just finishing her packing when a commotion downstairs caught her attention. Male voices, one of them Brennan's, the other achingly familiar. Her heart hammered in her chest as she hurried down the stairs. Benjamin Holloway stood in her shop, his handsome face flushed with anger as he confronted Brennan. His usually impeccable appearance was disheveled, his eyes bloodshot. "This is between me and Victoria," Benjamin was saying. "You had no right to interfere." "You lost any rights when you failed to show up yesterday," Brennan replied, his voice steady but with an undercurrent of steel Victoria had never heard before. Benjamin's gaze shifted to her as she reached the bottom of the stairs. "Victoria," he said, his tone immediately softening. "Thank God. I've been looking everywhere for you." "Have you?" she asked coldly. "You seem to know exactly where not to be yesterday." He had the grace to look ashamed. "I can explain. I got scared. I made a mistake. But when I heard what happened, that you actually married this horse trainer, I knew I had to come back and fix things." "There's nothing to fix," Victoria said, her hand instinctively covering her belly. "As you pointed out, I'm married now." Benjamin stepped toward her, but Brennan moved smoothly between them. "That's close enough, Holloway." "Get out of my way," Benjamin snarled. "She's carrying my child," "A child you were willing to abandon," Brennan countered. A child that will now bear my name and be raised under my roof. Benjamin's face contorted with rage. You think you can just step in and take my place? She doesn't love you, she loves me. The words were meant to hurt and they found their mark. Victoria flinched but then straightened her shoulders. Love, she asked quietly. Is that what you call it when you leave a woman alone at the altar, humiliated before the entire town? When you abandon your responsibilities to your unborn child? I made a mistake, Benjamin insisted. People make mistakes, Victoria, but we can fix this. We can get your marriage annulled. It's only been a day. Victoria looked at Benjamin, really looked at him. The man she had thought she loved suddenly seemed smaller, weaker than she remembered. His handsome features couldn't mask the selfishness in his eyes. There will be no annulment, she said firmly. I made vows yesterday and I intend to honor them. Benjamin's expression darkened. You can't be serious, you barely know him. I know that when I needed someone to stand beside me, he was there, Victoria replied, and you weren't. He's using you, Benjamin hissed. Probably wants a free housekeeper and someone to warm his bed. Is that what you've reduced yourself to? His charity case. Brennan moved so quickly that Victoria barely registered it before he had Benjamin by the collar, backing him toward the door. You've said enough, he growled. My wife has made her position clear. I suggest you respect it and leave. Benjamin struggled against Brennan's grip. This isn't over, he warned as Brennan pushed him onto the boardwalk outside. That's my child. A child you'll have nothing to do with, Brennan replied. Stay away from my family, Holloway. Next time I won't be so gentle. He closed the door firmly and turned to Victoria, his expression softening. Are you all right? Victoria realized she was trembling. The confrontation had drained what little energy she had. Yes, she said, though her voice wavered. I didn't expect to see him so soon. Brennan approached her cautiously, as if she might spook like one of his horses. He won't bother you again. I'll make sure of it. Victoria nodded, grateful for his protection even as a small part of her wondered if she had just exchanged one form of dependency for another. But when Brennan spoke again, his words dispelled that fear. What you said to him about honoring your vows, did you mean it? She met his gaze. I don't make promises lightly, Brennan. Yesterday may have been unexpected, but I meant every word I said before God and the Reverend. Something like relief crossed his features. Then that's settled. Now let's get your things home. Home. Such a simple word, but it carried so much meaning. As they loaded her belongings into Brennan's wagon, Victoria wondered if his ranch would ever truly feel like home to her. But when she glanced back at her shop with its closed sign in the window, she realized that home wasn't necessarily a place. Sometimes it was a choice, a commitment. And sometimes, just maybe, it was the person who stood beside you when everyone else walked away. The weeks that followed settled into an unexpected rhythm. Victoria reopened her dress shop, maintaining her usual hours but returning to the ranch each evening. To her surprise, Brennan had modified the wagon to make it more comfortable for her daily journeys, adding extra padding to the seat and a small awning for shade. At home, they developed a routine. Victoria took over the cooking and household tasks, while Brennan tended to the horses and ranch work. They shared meals together, their conversations gradually becoming less stilted as they learned more about each other. Victoria discovered that Brennan had come west from Pennsylvania after the Civil War, where he'd served in the Union Army. He rarely spoke of the conflict, but sometimes she caught him staring into the distance with a haunted look that suggested the memories were still fresh. He had learned horse training from his father and had a natural affinity for the animals that bordered on miraculous. They're honest creatures, he explained one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. They don't lie or pretend to be something they're not. If they're angry, scared, or happy, you know it. Unlike people, Victoria observed. Brennan nodded. Exactly unlike people. In turn, she shared stories of her childhood in Missouri, her parents' decision to move west for her father's health, and how she had learned dressmaking from her mother. She told him about opening the shop after their deaths, pouring her grief into creating something beautiful. What she didn't share was the loneliness that had made her vulnerable to Benjamin's charm, how his attention had filled a void left by her parents' passing. How that loneliness had led to one impulsive night that had resulted in her current condition. As Victoria's belly grew more prominent, Brennan began making alterations around the house, widening doorways, building a rocking chair with sturdy armrests, constructing a cradle with meticulous care. His thoughtfulness touched her deeply. One evening in late June, Victoria sat on the porch sewing baby clothes while Brennan worked in the corral with a young Mustang he was training. She found herself mesmerized by his methods, the gentle but firm way he communicated with the animal, the patience he exhibited when the horse resisted. When he finally removed the training halter and the Mustang followed him around the corral without restraint, Victoria couldn't help but applaud. Brennan looked up, seemingly surprised to find he had an audience. A rare smile crossed his features as he approached the porch, enjoying the show. "It's remarkable," she said honestly, "the way they trust you." "Trust has to be earned," he replied, taking a seat beside her. His gaze fell to the tiny garment in her hands. "That's coming along nicely." Victoria held up the small shirt. "It's nothing fancy, just practical." "Like its mother," he observed, then immediately looked as if he regretted the words. "I mean, it's all right," she assured him. "I am practical, I've had to be." A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the distant nickering of horses and the gentle creaking of Victoria's rocking chair. Then, without warning, she gasped. Brennan was immediately alert. "What is it? Are you unwell?" Victoria placed a hand on her rounded belly. "No, she broke off as it happened again. "The baby, it's moving." Relief washed over Brennan's face. "Is that the first time?" "No, but it's the strongest yet." Without thinking, she reached for his hand. "Would you like to feel it?" Brennan hesitated, uncertainty evident in his expression. "It's all right," Victoria said softly. "You're going to be this child's father in every way that matters." Slowly, he extended his hand. Victoria placed it gently on the spot where the baby was most active. For a moment nothing happened, then came a distinct flutter against his palm. Brennan's eyes widened in wonder. "That's incredible." "It is, isn't it?" Victoria smiled, watching his reaction. His hand remained on her belly longer than necessary, the warmth of it seeping through her dress. When their eyes met, something shifted in the air between them, something new and tentative but undeniably present. Brennan cleared his throat and withdrew his hand. "Thank you," he said simply, "for sharing that." Later that night, as Victoria prepared for bed, she found herself thinking about that moment on the porch. The look in Brennan's eyes had stirred something in her, a feeling she had thought buried with her failed relationship with Benjamin. It both excited and frightened her. This marriage had begun as a practical arrangement, a solution to an impossible situation. She had not expected to develop feelings for the quiet, steadfast man who had saved her from disgrace. Yet here she was, her heart beating faster at the memory of his hand on her belly, his smile in the fading light. Victoria placed her own hand where his had been. "Your father is a good man," she whispered to her unborn child. "Your real father, the one who will raise you and love you." As she drifted off to sleep, Victoria wondered if perhaps the greatest twist in her unexpected journey wasn't being left at the altar, but finding that sometimes salvation and love could come from the most unexpected sources. July brought sweltering heat to Wyoming territory. The days stretched long and hot, the sun beating down mercilessly on the parched landscape. Despite her advancing pregnancy, Victoria continued working at her dress shop, though she had reduced her hours at Brennan's insistence. "The heat's no good for you or the baby," he had said firmly. "Half-days are plenty," she had acquiesced, secretly grateful. The summer heat combined with her pregnancy made her tire more easily than she cared to admit. On a particularly stifling afternoon, Victoria was closing up her shop when Sheriff Mills appeared at the door. "Afternoon, Mrs. Blackett," he said, removing his hat. Victoria still wasn't entirely used to her new surname, but she smiled politely. "Good afternoon, Sheriff. What can I do for you?" The lawman shifted uncomfortably. "I hate to trouble you, madam, but there's been an incident. That is, Mr. Holloway has been causing a disturbance at the Rusty Nail Saloon, been drinking heavily and making some concerning statements." Victoria's smile faded. "What kind of statements?" "Threats, madam, against your husband. Said something about taking back what's his and settling scores. I've had him locked up to sober up, but I thought you should know." A cold knot of dread formed in Victoria's stomach. "Thank you for telling me. Has my husband been informed?" "Not yet. Thought it might be better coming from you." "Didn't want him riding into town looking for trouble." Victoria nodded. I appreciate your discretion, Sheriff. I'll tell him myself. After the sheriff left, Victoria closed the shop with trembling hands. Benjamin had been relatively quiet in the months since their confrontation, though she occasionally caught glimpses of him around town. The idea that he was now making threats worried her deeply. When she arrived home, Victoria found Brennan in the barn, examining the hoof of a chestnut mare. He looked up as she entered, his brow furrowing at her expression. "What's wrong?" he asked immediately, setting down the horse's leg. Victoria related what the sheriff had told her, watching Brennan's face darken as she spoke. "I knew he wouldn't let this lie," he said grimly. "Men like Holloway can't stand to lose. Sheriff Mills has him locked up for now," Victoria said, "but I'm worried about what he might do when he's released." Brennan wiped his hands on a rag. "You don't need to worry. I can handle Benjamin Holloway." "That's exactly what worries me," Victoria replied. "I don't want you getting hurt because of my past mistakes." Brennan's expression softened. "That child you're carrying isn't a mistake, Victoria, and neither was marrying you." His words wrapped around her heart like a warm blanket. Before she could respond, he continued, "I'll ride into town tomorrow, have a word with the sheriff, see if we can reach an understanding with Holloway." "I'll come with you," Victoria said firmly. Brennan shook his head. "Not this time. In your condition, in my condition, I'm still capable of handling my own affairs," she interrupted. "This involves me, Brennan, us, our family. I won't sit at home while you face this alone." He studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "All right, but we do this carefully. No confrontations." Victoria placed a hand on his arm. "Thank you for understanding." That evening, they ate dinner on the porch to escape the stifling heat inside the house. The sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, a beautiful contrast to the uncertainty weighing on their minds. "Tell me about the horses you're training," Victoria said, deliberately changing the subject from their worries about Benjamin. Brennan seemed grateful for the distraction. "The bay gelding is coming along well. He'll make a fine cow horse for the Thornton Ranch. The Mustang is still skittish, but he's starting to trust me." "Like all of us," Victoria said softly. Brennan set down his fork. "Victoria, there's something I should tell you about why I stepped forward that day in the church." Her heart quickened. "You said it was out of respect." "That was part of it," he admitted. "But not all." Victoria waited, hardly daring to breathe. "I've admired you for a long time," Brennan continued, his voice low. "The way you carried on after your parents died, how you built that shop from nothing. Your kindness to everyone in town, even those who didn't deserve it." "You never said anything," Victoria whispered. "What was there to say? You were courting Holloway and I—" He paused. "I'm not good with words, never have been. But when I saw you standing there at the altar, alone and abandoned, I couldn't bear it. Not because I pitied you, but because He broke off, seeming to struggle with the words. Victoria reached across the table and took his hand. "Because what?" Brennan met her gaze, vulnerability clear in his eyes. "Because I thought maybe, just maybe, I could make you happy, happier than he ever could." The admission hung in the air between them, changing everything and nothing all at once. Victoria's heart swelled with an emotion she had been fighting for weeks. "Brennan," she began, but he shook his head. "You don't need to say anything. I know this isn't what you planned. I know your heart belonged to someone else. I just wanted you to understand why I did what I did." Victoria squeezed his hand. "My heart did belong to someone else, once, but hearts can change, Brennan. Mine has." His eyes widened slightly. "Victoria, no, let me finish," she said. "These past months you've shown me what a real man is, what real respect and care look like. Benjamin never loved me the way I deserved. I see that now." Brennan stood, pulling her gently to her feet. In the fading light, his features were softer, more open than she'd ever seen them. "Are you saying what I think you're saying?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. Victoria stepped closer to him, her rounded belly pressing lightly against him. "I'm saying that I've fallen in love with my husband, and it terrifies me and thrills me all at once." For a moment, Brennan remained still, as if afraid any movement might shatter this fragile new reality. Then slowly, he cupped her face in his calloused hands. "I've loved you from afar for so long," he murmured. "Loving you up close is more than I ever dared hope for." When his lips met hers, Victoria felt as though all the broken pieces of her life were finally falling into place. This kiss was nothing like Benjamin's passionate but ultimately empty embraces. This was a promise, a foundation, something real and true. As they broke apart, Brennan pressed his forehead to hers. Whatever happens tomorrow with Holloway, we face it together, as a family. Victoria nodded, a sense of peace washing over her despite the uncertainty ahead. Together, she agreed. The next morning, Victoria and Brennan rode into Wheatland together. The sun had barely crested the horizon, but already the day promised to be another scorcher. They headed directly for the sheriff's office, hoping to resolve the situation with Benjamin before the heat of the day set in. Sheriff Mills was at his desk when they entered. He stood, offering Victoria a chair which she gratefully accepted. "Holloway's still sleeping it off," the sheriff informed them. "Reckon he'll be awake soon enough. I can keep him locked up a few more hours for disturbing the peace, but I can't hold him indefinitely." "We understand," Brennan said. "But his threats concern me, especially given Victoria's condition," the sheriff nodded. "I've warned him before about making threats, told him I'd run him out of town if he caused any more trouble." "I'd like to speak with him," Victoria said, earning surprised looks from both men. "I don't think that's wise," Brennan began. "Neither do I, madam," the sheriff agreed. Victoria straightened in her chair. "With all due respect, gentlemen, this situation won't be resolved until Benjamin understands that I've made my choice. I need to make that clear to him face to face." Brennan and the sheriff exchanged glances. "If she speaks to him in the cell with both of us present, he can't harm her," Brennan finally conceded. The sheriff sighed. "All right, but at the first sign of trouble, we end it." They moved to the small cell block at the back of the office. Benjamin was awake now, sitting on the edge of the cot with his head in his hands. He looked up as they approached, his eyes bloodshot but instantly focusing on Victoria. "Victoria," he said, standing. "Thank God you're here. Get me out of this place." "That's not why I came, Benjamin," she replied steadily. "I came to tell you that this has to stop." He gripped the bars of the cell. "It's him, isn't it?" he spat, glaring at Brennan. "He's turned you against me. He's keeping us apart." "No," Victoria said firmly. "Your own actions did that. You abandoned me and your unborn child when we needed you most." "I made a mistake," Benjamin shouted. "How many times do I have to say it? I was scared, but I came back for you." "Too late," Victoria replied. "And now you're making threats, drinking, causing scenes. That's not the behavior of a man who should be a father." Benjamin's face contorted with anger. "That's my child. You can't keep it from me." Victoria placed a protective hand over her belly. "This child will be raised by Brennan Blackett. He will carry the Blackett name. And he or she will know what it means to have a father who stands by his family no matter what." "You can't do this," Benjamin hissed. "I have rights." Sheriff Mills stepped forward. "Actually, Mr. Holloway, the law's pretty clear on this. A child born in wedlock is legally the husband's, regardless of other circumstances." Benjamin's face paled. "This isn't over," he warned, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "I'll get a lawyer. I'll fight this. That cowboy can't just take what's mine." "I'm not yours," Victoria said quietly. "I never really was, and neither is this child. We belong with Brennan now." She turned to leave, but Benjamin called after her. "He'll never love you like I did." "Never." Victoria paused, looking back over her shoulder. "You're right, he loves me better." Outside the sheriff's office, Victoria released a shaky breath. The confrontation had drained her, but she felt lighter somehow, as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. Brennan took her arm gently. "You were magnificent in there," she smiled weakly. "I said what needed to be said." "Do you think it will make a difference?" "Time will tell," Brennan replied, "but the sheriff will keep an eye on him, and I'll keep an eye on you." He hesitated. "What you said in there about us belonging together?" "I meant every word," Victoria assured him. They walked arm in arm toward the dress shop. Victoria had just unlocked the door when Mrs. Peterson, the banker's wife who had avoided her months earlier, approached hesitantly. "Mrs. Blackett," she said, "I was hoping your shop would be open today. I need a new Sunday dress, and everyone says your work is the finest in the territory." Victoria blinked in surprise. Mrs. Peterson had been one of the most judgmental voices after the altar incident. "Of course," she managed. "I'd be happy to help you." As they discussed fabrics and patterns, Victoria caught sight of Brennan through the window. He was watching her with a smile that warmed her from the inside out. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Benjamin's threats, the baby's arrival, the inevitable gossip of small-town life, they would face them together. And somehow, that made all the difference. August arrived with no relief from the heat. Victoria's pregnancy had progressed to the point where even the modified corsets she had designed for herself provided little comfort. Her ankles swelled in the heat, and her back ached constantly. Yet she maintained her half-days at the shop, refusing to be confined to the house despite Brennan's concerns. "The doctor said light activity is beneficial," she reminded him one evening as he massaged her swollen feet, "and sewing is hardly strenuous work." Brennan's fingers worked magic on her aching arches. "The doctor also said not to overexert yourself in this heat. Promise me you'll rest if you feel tired." "I promise," Victoria agreed, unable to resist his genuine concern. These quiet moments together had become precious to her the way they cared for each other in simple, meaningful ways. Their relationship had blossomed since that evening on the porch when they had confessed their feelings. Brennan now slept in her bed rather than his own room, his strong arms providing comfort during the increasingly uncomfortable nights of late pregnancy. Their physical relationship had developed naturally and tenderly, Brennan always mindful of her condition. The gossip about their sudden marriage had finally begun to subside, especially after Victoria's confrontation with Benjamin. Mrs. Peterson's patronage of the dress shop had opened the door for other prominent women in town to return as well. While not everyone was convinced by their story, most had come to accept the Blacketts as a legitimate couple. Benjamin had been released from jail the day after their confrontation and had left town shortly thereafter, reportedly heading to Cheyenne. The sheriff had warned him against returning to Wheatland, and so far he had heeded that warning. Still, Victoria couldn't shake the feeling that they hadn't heard the last of him. On a sweltering afternoon in mid-August, Victoria was taking inventory of her fabrics when a sharp pain gripped her abdomen. She gasped, clutching the edge of the counter until it passed. Probably just another false contraction, she told herself. She'd been experiencing them with increasing frequency over the past week. When another pain came just 20 minutes later, however, Victoria began to worry. The baby wasn't due for at least another 3 weeks. She closed the shop early and made her way to the wagon, but halfway there, another contraction hit stronger this time, forcing her to lean against a hitching post for support. "Mrs. Blackett, are you all right?" It was Mrs. Reynolds, the schoolteacher, her face creased with concern. I think the baby might be coming," Victoria managed through gritted teeth. Mrs. Reynolds' eyes widened. "Goodness, you can't drive yourself home like this. Let me fetch Dr. Wilson. And my husband," Victoria added. "He's at the livery looking at a new horse." While Mrs. Reynolds hurried off, Victoria lowered herself carefully to a bench outside the general store. The pain had subsided for now, but she knew another contraction would come soon. It felt like an eternity before Brennan appeared, his face pale with worry. He knelt before her, taking her hands in his. "The baby," Victoria nodded, a mixture of fear and excitement coursing through her. "It's early." "Dr. Wilson is on his way," Brennan assured her. "Can you stand? I'll help you to the wagon." With his support, Victoria made it to their wagon just as Dr. Wilson arrived. After a brief examination, the doctor confirmed what Victoria already knew. "This baby is coming, and soon," he said. "We need to get you home or to my office immediately." "Home," Victoria said without hesitation. "I want to have the baby at home." The journey back to the ranch was agonizing. Every bump in the road seemed to trigger another contraction. Brennan drove as carefully as possible, his knuckles white on the reins. Dr. Wilson rode alongside them on his horse, occasionally calling out instructions. By the time they reached the ranch, Victoria's contractions were coming regularly every 7 minutes. Brennan carried her inside and up to their bedroom, where Dr. Wilson and Mrs. Reynolds, who had insisted on accompanying them to help, quickly prepared for the birth. "Send your husband for hot water and clean linens," Mrs. Reynolds instructed as she helped Victoria out of her dress and into a nightgown. Victoria reached for Brennan's hand before he could leave. "Don't go far," she pleaded, a flicker of fear in her eyes. He pressed a kiss to her forehead. "I'll be right downstairs. Nothing could keep me away." The labor progressed rapidly after that. Victoria had heard enough birth stories to know that first babies often took their time, but this child seemed determined to enter the world quickly. The pain was unlike anything she had ever experienced, waves of agony that left her gasping and clutching at the sheets. Mrs. Reynolds wiped her brow with a cool cloth while Dr. Wilson monitored her progress. "You're doing beautifully," the schoolteacher encouraged. "Strong women make for strong babies." Through the fog of pain, Victoria thought of her own mother, who had birthed 3 children before her but lost 2 to childhood illnesses. She wished desperately that her mother could be here now, guiding her through this most feminine of journeys. As if reading her thoughts, Mrs. Reynolds squeezed her hand. "Your mother would be so proud of the woman you've become, Victoria, so proud of how you've handled yourself through everything." Tears slipped down Victoria's cheeks, but before she could respond, another contraction gripped her, more powerful than any before. She cried out, unable to contain the sound. Immediately, footsteps pounded up the stairs and Brennan's voice called from the hallway. "Victoria, is she all right?" "She's fine," Dr. Wilson called back. "This is normal, Mr. Blackett. Let him in," Victoria gasped as the contraction subsided. "Please." Dr. Wilson and Mrs. Reynolds exchanged glances. It wasn't customary for husbands to be present during childbirth, but these were unusual circumstances. "Very well," the doctor finally agreed, "but only if you stay at the head of the bed, Mr. Blackett." Brennan entered the room, his face a mask of concern. He immediately moved to Victoria's side, taking her hand in his. "I'm here," he said simply. His presence gave her strength. Through the next hour of increasingly intense contractions, Brennan stayed beside her, wiping her brow, murmuring encouragement, letting her crush his hand when the pain became unbearable. "It's time to push, Mrs. Blackett," Dr. Wilson finally announced. With the next contraction, "Bear down with all your might." Victoria nodded, exhausted but determined. Brennan supported her shoulders as she pushed, his strength flowing into her. Again and again she pushed, each effort bringing the baby closer to the world. "I see the head," Dr. Wilson exclaimed. "One more good push, Victoria." Summoning her last reserves of energy, Victoria bore down. A searing pain tore through her, followed by the most miraculous sensation of release. And then, cutting through the silence that followed, came a thin, angry wail. "A boy, doctor," Wilson announced, holding up the squalling infant. "A fine, healthy boy." Victoria collapsed back against the pillows, tears of joy and exhaustion streaming down her face. Brennan leaned forward, pressing his lips to her temple. "You did it," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You're incredible." Mrs. Reynolds cleaned and swaddled the baby before placing him in Victoria's arms. He was smaller than she had expected, with a shock of dark hair and a red, wrinkled face. But to Victoria, he was perfect. "Hello, little one," she murmured, tracing a finger over his tiny features. "We've been waiting for you." Brennan sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the baby with wonder. "He's beautiful," he said softly, "just like his mother." Victoria looked up at him, her heart so full it might burst. "Would you like to hold your son?" The word son hung between them, heavy with meaning. This child wasn't Brennan's by blood, but in every way that mattered, in every way that counted, he was his father. Carefully, reverently, Brennan took the baby in his arms. The infant quieted almost immediately, as if recognizing the man who would raise him, protect him, love him. "What shall we name him?" Brennan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Victoria had been contemplating names for months, but had never settled on one. Now, looking at Brennan holding the baby with such tenderness, she knew. "Samuel," she said, "after your father." Brennan looked at her in surprise. "You would do that?" "Of course," Victoria replied. "Samuel Brennan Blackett, a strong name for a strong boy." Brennan's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Samuel," he repeated, looking down at the baby. "Welcome to the world, son." Mrs. Reynolds and Dr. Wilson discreetly left the new family alone, promising to return later to check on mother and child. In the golden afternoon light filtering through the bedroom window, Victoria watched her husband and son together and knew that this moment, this perfect moment, was worth every hardship she had endured to reach it. The altar where she had stood abandoned seemed a lifetime ago now. The pain of Benjamin's betrayal had faded to a distant memory, overshadowed by the love she had found with the man who had stepped forward to take her hand when she needed it most. As if sensing her thoughts, Brennan looked up from the baby. "I've been thinking," he said. "About that day in the church." "What about it?" Victoria asked. "I always thought I saved you that day," he said softly, "but I'm beginning to think you saved me too." Victoria smiled through her exhaustion. "Perhaps we saved each other." Brennan leaned forward to kiss her, the baby cradled safely between them. "I love you, Victoria Blackett," he murmured against her lips. "You and Samuel are everything I never knew I needed." "And we'll always need you," she replied, her heart full to bursting. "Always." The days following Samuel's birth passed in a blur of exhaustion and joy. Victoria recovered quickly from the delivery, though Dr. Wilson insisted she remain in bed for at least a week. Brennan proved himself an attentive father, changing diapers and walking the floors with Samuel when he was fussy, allowing Victoria precious hours of sleep. Word of Samuel's early arrival spread through Wheatland, and soon visitors began appearing at the ranch bearing gifts and well wishes. Mrs. Reynolds came daily, bringing meals and offering assistance. Even Mrs. Peterson arrived with a beautifully knitted baby blanket and congratulations that seemed genuinely warm. By the time Samuel was 2 weeks old, life had settled into a new routine. Victoria was up and about, though she hadn't yet returned to her shop. She and Brennan had discussed it and decided she would wait until Samuel was at least a month old before resuming work, and even then, only for a few hours each day with the baby at her side. On a pleasantly cool September morning, Victoria sat on the porch nursing Samuel while Brennan worked with a client's horse in the corral. The peaceful scene was interrupted by the sound of an approaching wagon. Victoria adjusted her shawl to cover herself and the baby, peering down the drive to identify their visitor. Sheriff Mills pulled his wagon to a stop in front of the house, his expression grave as he removed his hat. "Morning, Mrs. Blackett. Is your husband about?" "He's in the corral," Victoria replied, suddenly anxious. "Is something wrong, Sheriff?" "I'm afraid there might be," he said, glancing toward the barn. "Benjamin Holloway returned to town last night. He's been asking questions about you and the baby." Victoria's arms tightened protectively around Samuel. "What kind of questions?" "When the child was born, whether it was a boy or girl, where you live." The sheriff shifted uncomfortably. "I didn't tell him anything, of course, but Wheatland's a small town, people talk." Brennan appeared from the direction of the corral, alerted by the sheriff's arrival. "What's happened?" he asked, striding toward them. Sheriff Mills repeated the information, adding, "He was at the Rusty Nail again last night, drinking heavily. Made some comments about reclaiming what's his that concerned me enough to ride out here." Brennan's jaw tightened. "I appreciate the warning, Sheriff. I'll keep an eye out." "I can post a deputy near your property for a few days," the sheriff offered. "Just until we see what Holloway's intentions are." "That won't be necessary," Brennan said firmly. "I can protect my family." After the sheriff departed, Victoria followed Brennan inside, Samuel now sleeping peacefully against her shoulder. "Do you really think Benjamin would try something?" Brennan ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Victoria had come to recognize as a sign of his concern. "I don't know. He's unpredictable, especially when he's been drinking." "What should we do?" Victoria asked, gently laying Samuel in his cradle. Brennan's expression softened as he watched the baby sleep. "For now, we stay vigilant. You don't go into town alone. I'll speak with some of the ranch hands about keeping an eye out for strangers." Victoria nodded, though the idea of Benjamin disrupting their newfound happiness filled her with dread. They had come too far, overcome too much, to let him threaten their family now. That night, after Samuel's late feeding, Victoria found it difficult to sleep. She kept imagining Benjamin appearing at their door, demanding the baby. Brennan seemed to sense her unease, pulling her closer in the darkness. "Try to rest," he murmured against her hair. "I won't let anything happen to either of you," she believed him. In the month since their wedding, Brennan had proven himself a man of his word in every way. Still, fear nagged at her, not for herself but for Samuel. What if Benjamin tried to take him? What if he succeeded? The next few days passed without incident. Brennan arranged for one of his most trusted hands, a young man named Charlie, to escort Victoria whenever she needed to go into town. She reopened her shop on a limited basis, working just 3 afternoons a week with Samuel nearby in a cradle Brennan had built specifically for the shop. On Friday afternoon, Victoria was fitting Mrs. Mayer for a new dress when the bell above the shop door jingled. She looked up, expecting another customer, but instead found Benjamin standing in the doorway. He looked thinner than she remembered, his once handsome face haggard and unshaven. His eyes, however, were clear and focused directly on the cradle in the corner. "Is that him?" he asked without preamble. "Is that my son?" Mrs. Mayer gasped, clutching her partially pinned dress to her chest. Victoria's heart raced, but she forced herself to remain calm. Charlie had stepped out to purchase supplies but would return soon. "You need to leave, Benjamin," Victoria said firmly. "You're not welcome here." He took a step forward. "I have a right to see my own child." "Samuel is not your child," Victoria replied, moving protectively toward the cradle. "He is a Blackett. You forfeited any claim to him when you abandoned us both." Benjamin's face darkened with anger. "That's a lie. I made a mistake, but he's still my flesh and blood." Mrs. Mayer, sensing the tension, quickly retreated to the changing room. "I should finish dressing," she murmured. Once she was gone, Benjamin advanced further into the shop. "I want to see him, Victoria. Hold him. That's all I'm asking." "No," Victoria said, standing her ground. "Samuel doesn't know you. You're a stranger to him." "Because you've kept him from me." Benjamin's voice rose. "That cowboy has no right to my son. What does he know about raising a child? He trains horses for a living." "He knows about loyalty," Victoria shot back. "About keeping promises, about being there when someone needs you." Benjamin's expression contorted with rage. "I'm taking him with me," he declared. "I've spoken to a lawyer in Cheyenne. He says I have rights." Victoria's blood ran cold. "You're not taking him anywhere. Samuel stays with his father and me." "I am his father," Benjamin roared, lunging forward. Victoria screamed, backing against the cradle as Benjamin grabbed her arm. Samuel woke with a startled cry, his wails filling the shop. The back door burst open and Charlie rushed in, his young face fierce with determination. "Get your hands off her," he shouted, pulling Benjamin away from Victoria. Benjamin swung wildly, his fist connecting with Charlie's jaw. The young ranch hand staggered but didn't fall, instead tackling Benjamin to the ground. They struggled on the floor of the shop, knocking over a dress form and sending bolts of fabric tumbling from the shelves. "Stop it," Victoria cried, gathering Samuel into her arms. "Stop this at once." Mrs. Mayer emerged from the changing room, now fully dressed. "I'm fetching the sheriff," she declared, hurrying out the front door. Benjamin managed to gain the upper hand, pinning Charlie to the floor. "Give me my son, Victoria," he demanded, breathing heavily. "I won't ask again." "Never," she replied, backing toward the door. With a growl of frustration, Benjamin released Charlie and lunged for Victoria. She turned to flee, but her skirts hampered her movement. Benjamin caught her by the shoulder, spinning her around. "Let her go, Holloway." Brennan stood in the doorway, his tall frame blocking the exit. His voice was deadly calm, but his eyes blazed with a fury Victoria had never seen before. Benjamin sneered. "This doesn't concern you, Blackett. This is between me and the mother of my child." "Victoria is my wife," Brennan replied evenly. "Samuel is my son, and you are trespassing." Benjamin laughed bitterly. "You can play house all you want, but that doesn't change the truth. That boy has my blood, not yours." "Blood doesn't make a father," Brennan said, taking a step forward. "Being there does, loving does, sacrificing does." Benjamin released Victoria, turning his attention fully to Brennan. "I'm taking my son with me. Try to stop me, and you'll regret it." In one fluid motion, Brennan drew his revolver. "I won't tell you again. Leave my family alone." Victoria clutched Samuel tighter, her heart pounding. She had never seen Brennan armed before, had never imagined him threatening another man with violence. Yet in this moment, she was grateful for his protection. Benjamin's eyes darted between Brennan's gun and the baby in Victoria's arms. For a tense moment, no one moved. Then slowly he raised his hands. "This isn't over," he warned. "I'll be back with the law on my side." "The law is already here," came Sheriff Mills's voice as he entered the shop behind Brennan. "And you're under arrest, Holloway, for assault, threatening behavior, and destruction of property." As the sheriff handcuffed Benjamin, Victoria sagged with relief. Brennan holstered his gun and crossed the room to her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "Are you hurt?" he asked, urgently scanning her face. "No," she assured him, "just shaken. How did you know to come?" "One of your customers saw Holloway enter the shop and recognized him from the wedding fiasco," Brennan explained. "She rode out to the ranch to warn me." Victoria looked around at her shop, now in disarray from the struggle. Charlie was on his feet, rubbing his jaw but otherwise unharmed. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Blackett," the young man said. "I tried to stop him." "You were very brave, Charlie," Victoria replied gratefully. "Thank you." As Sheriff Mills led a protesting Benjamin away, Brennan gently guided Victoria to a chair. "I think the shop should remain closed for the rest of the day," he said. "Let's get you and Samuel home." Victoria nodded, suddenly exhausted. The confrontation had drained what little energy she had. As Brennan helped her into the wagon, Samuel now calmed and sleeping against her chest, she couldn't shake Benjamin's words. "What if he does come back with a lawyer?" she asked as they drove home. "What if they try to take Samuel from us?" Brennan's hands were steady on the reins. "That won't happen," he said with quiet certainty. "I've already spoken with Judge Parker about formally adopting Samuel. The papers are being drawn up as we speak." Victoria stared at him in surprise. "You have? When?" "The day after he was born," Brennan replied. "I wanted to make sure everything was legal and proper. Once the adoption is complete, Benjamin will have no claim to him whatsoever." Tears filled Victoria's eyes. "You think of everything, don't you?" Brennan reached over to squeeze her hand. "When it comes to protecting you and Samuel." "Yes, I try to." That evening, after Samuel had been fed and put down for the night, Victoria and Brennan sat together on the porch swing. The confrontation with Benjamin had left her shaken, but there was also a sense of resolution. The sight of Brennan standing in that doorway, ready to defend their family at any cost, had cemented something in her heart. "I was so afraid today," she admitted, leaning against his shoulder. "Not for myself, but for Samuel." "I know," Brennan said softly, "but Benjamin can't hurt him now. The sheriff is keeping him locked up until the judge returns next week, and by then the adoption papers should be finalized." Victoria turned to face him. "You've never told me why you didn't have children of your own. Before me, I mean." Brennan was quiet for a long moment. "There was a girl back in Pennsylvania," he finally said. "Before the war, we were to be married when I returned." "What happened?" Victoria asked gently. "She didn't wait," he said simply. "Married a man who didn't go to fight. I can't blame her. 3 years is a long time, and I came back." "Different. The war changes a man." Victoria touched his face. "I'm sorry." He covered her hand with his own. "Don't be. If things had gone differently, I wouldn't be here now, wouldn't have you or Samuel." "When you stepped forward in that church," Victoria said softly, "I thought you were offering charity. Pity even. I never imagined we would be here like this." "Neither did I," Brennan admitted. "I just knew I couldn't bear to see you standing there alone. Everything else loving you, becoming a father to Samuel, that was the miracle I never expected." Victoria leaned forward to kiss him, pouring all her gratitude and love into the gesture. When they parted, she rested her forehead against his. "No more talk of Benjamin or lawyers or adoptions tonight," she murmured. "Tonight, let's just be a family." Brennan smiled, pulling her closer. "A family," he repeated. "I like the sound of that." The following week brought the resolution they had been hoping for. Judge Parker returned to Wheatland and quickly approved Brennan's petition to adopt Samuel. The formal document declared Samuel Brennan Blackett the legal son of Brennan and Victoria Blackett, with all the rights and privileges therein. Benjamin, still in Sheriff Mills's custody, was given a choice: face charges for his behavior at the dress shop or leave the Wyoming territory permanently. He chose the latter, departing on the eastbound stage the very day the adoption was finalized. "He asked me to give you this," Sheriff Mills said, handing Victoria a sealed letter when he came to inform them of Benjamin's departure. Victoria opened it with trembling fingers, Brennan's steadying presence beside her as she read, "Victoria, I realize now that my actions have been driven by pride rather than love. The truth is, I'm not ready to be a father. Perhaps I never will be. The boy deserves better than what I can offer him. Blackett seems to be a good man, much as it pains me to admit it. Take care of your son. I won't trouble you again." Benjamin. Victoria folded the letter carefully. "He's gone," she said, a weight lifting from her shoulders. "Truly gone," Brennan nodded. "Good, now we can focus on the future." And focus they did. As autumn painted the Wyoming landscape in golds and reds, the Blackett family settled into a peaceful rhythm. Victoria reopened her dress shop full-time, with Samuel accompanying her most days. The townspeople, perhaps impressed by Brennan's unwavering devotion to his new family, embraced them completely. The whispers and judgmental glances that had followed Victoria after being left at the altar were replaced by admiration for the strong, loving family they had created. Brennan's horse training business flourished, his reputation spreading throughout the territory. He began taking on apprentices, teaching them his gentle methods and fair treatment of the animals. As Samuel grew from newborn to infant, his personality emerged stubborn like his mother, observant like his father. He had Victoria's dark hair and Brennan's blue eyes, a combination that strangers often remarked upon with comments like, "He's the spitting image of his father." These comments never failed to bring a secret smile to Victoria's lips. In all the ways that truly mattered, Samuel was indeed Brennan's son. On the first anniversary of their wedding, Brennan surprised Victoria by taking her to dinner at the new hotel restaurant in Wheatland, a rare luxury in the frontier town. Charlie had volunteered to watch Samuel for the evening, eager to repay them for the opportunity Brennan had given him as an apprentice. "To 1 year," Brennan said, raising his glass of wine. "The best year of my life." Victoria clinked her glass against his. "It's been quite a journey, hasn't it?" "From that day in the church to now. Would you change any of it?" he asked, a hint of vulnerability in his question. Victoria considered this. "Not a single moment," she said honestly. "Every step, even the painful ones, led us here." After dinner, Brennan had another surprise. He produced a small velvet box from his pocket and placed it on the table between them. "What's this?" Victoria asked, touching the box cautiously. "Open it and see." Inside was a delicate gold band set with a small diamond. Victoria looked up in confusion, but we're already married. Brennan took her hand. "We are, but our first wedding was unexpected. You deserved better than that. I thought perhaps we might renew our vows, this time with you fully choosing me, not just accepting the hand fate dealt you." Tears welled in Victoria's eyes. "Brennan Blackett, I chose you every day this past year, with every sunrise and sunset, with every moment of our life together." "Is that a yes?" he asked, a smile playing at his lips. "Yes," Victoria laughed through her tears. "1,000 times yes." They renewed their vows the following Sunday, with Samuel in Victoria's arms and the entire town of Wheatland in attendance. This time there was no abandoned bride, no last-minute stand-in, no whispers or pitying glances. There was only a family, bound together by love stronger than blood, promising to face whatever the future held together. 5 years later, 1878, the Blackett Ranch had grown considerably in 5 years. What had once been a modest operation was now one of the most prosperous horse breeding facilities in the Wyoming territory. Brennan's reputation for fair dealing and exceptional horses had spread far and wide, bringing clients from as far away as California and Texas. Victoria's dress shop had expanded as well. She now employed 3 seamstresses and had added a millinery section that was the pride of Wheatland. Her designs were sought after by ladies throughout the territory, some traveling days just to be fitted for one of her creations. But the greatest growth had been in their family. Samuel, now a rambunctious 5-year-old with his father's love of horses and his mother's quick mind, had been joined by 2 siblings. 3-year-old Emma with her mother's gentle nature and strawberry blonde curls, and baby James, just 6 months old, already showing signs of being as strong-willed as both his parents. On a crisp October morning, Victoria stood on the porch of their expanded home, baby James on her hip, watching as Brennan gave Samuel his first riding lesson on a gentle pony. Emma sat perched on the corral fence, clapping her hands in delight as her brother bounced around the enclosure. "Look, Mama, I'm riding," Samuel called, his face alight with pride. "I see you, darling, you're doing wonderfully," Victoria called back, waving. Brennan walked alongside the pony, one hand ready to catch Samuel if needed, though the boy was already showing natural balance and confidence. "He's a born horseman," came a voice behind her. Victoria turned to find Charlie, now the ranch foreman and practically family, stepping onto the porch with the mail. Like his father, Victoria agreed with a smile. Charlie handed her several envelopes. "Speaking of fathers, this came for you." From back east. Victoria glanced at the return address and felt a small jolt of surprise. The letter was from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. She hadn't received correspondence from anyone there in years. "Thank you, Charlie," she said, tucking the letter into her apron pocket to read later. The riding lesson concluded with Samuel begging to go again and Brennan promising more tomorrow. As they walked back to the house, Emmer running ahead and Samuel chattering excitedly about his adventure, Brennan slipped his arm around Victoria's waist. "He's a natural," he said proudly. "Takes to it like he was born in the saddle." Victoria leaned into his embrace. "He had an excellent teacher." They shared a quiet moment on the porch, watching their children play in the yard. These peaceful interludes were precious amid their busy lives. "What's that?" Brennan asked, noticing the corner of the letter peeking from Victoria's pocket. "A letter from Philadelphia," she replied. "I haven't opened it yet." Brennan's expression grew serious. "Do you think it's from—" "I don't know," Victoria admitted, "but I'm not concerned either way." Later that evening, after the children were in bed, Victoria sat at her dressing table and opened the mysterious letter. As she read, her hand flew to her mouth in surprise. "What is it?" Brennan asked, watching her from their bed. "It's from Benjamin's sister," Victoria said, looking up. "Benjamin died 3 months ago, typhoid fever." Brennan set aside the book he'd been reading. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. Victoria continued reading. "She says he spoke of Samuel near the end, asked about him. She found my name among his papers and thought I should know." "How do you feel?" Brennan asked gently. Victoria considered the question. Benjamin Holloway had once been the center of her world, the man she thought she would spend her life with, the father of her firstborn child. Yet the pain and betrayal of his abandonment had long since healed, replaced by the deep, abiding love she shared with Brennan. "I feel sad for him," she finally said. "Sad that he never knew what it was to have a family like ours, to love and be loved the way we love each other." Brennan crossed the room to stand behind her, his hands resting on her shoulders. "Do you want to tell Samuel someday about Benjamin?" Victoria had thought about this question often over the years. "Yes," she said. "When he's older, he deserves to know the truth, but it won't change anything. You're his father in every way that matters." Brennan leaned down to kiss the top of her head. "Whatever you decide, I'll support you." Victoria turned to face him, taking his hands in hers. "Do you ever think about that day, when you stepped forward in the church?" "Often," Brennan admitted with a smile. "Best impulsive decision I ever made." "It wasn't impulse," Victoria corrected him. "It was courage, the courage to reach for happiness when it seemed impossible." Brennan pulled her to her feet and into his arms. "I never imagined then what we would build together. This ranch, the children, the life we share, it's more than I ever dared dream of. And we're just getting started," Victoria murmured against his chest. "There are still so many adventures ahead." Later that night, as Brennan slept beside her, Victoria stood at the window looking out at the moonlit landscape of their ranch. In the distance, she could see the silhouettes of horses in the pasture, the barn where Brennan worked his magic with even the wildest mustangs, the small family cemetery where her parents now rested. This land, this home, this family, they had all grown from that singular moment of crisis and courage. From the ashes of abandonment and heartbreak had risen something beautiful and enduring. Victoria thought of the letter from Philadelphia, now tucked away in a drawer. Benjamin was gone, but his greatest gift remained. The child who had brought her and Brennan together, the catalyst for the life they now cherished. As if sensing her thoughts, Samuel appeared in the doorway, sleepy-eyed and tousled. "Mama," he whispered, "I had a dream about horses." Victoria smiled, crossing to him and lifting him into her arms, marveling at how big he was getting. "Did you now? Was it a good dream?" He nodded against her shoulder. "I was riding with Papa. We went all the way to the mountains." "That sounds wonderful," Victoria said, carrying him back to his room. "Maybe someday you and Papa will really do that." "You and Emma and James too," Samuel insisted as she tucked him back into bed. "All of us together." "All of us together," Victoria agreed, smoothing his dark hair. "That's the best way to be." As she returned to her own bed, slipping beneath the covers beside Brennan, Victoria thought again of that fateful day at the altar. She had stood there feeling abandoned, forsaken, at the lowest point of her life. And then a quiet cowboy had stepped forward and taken her hand, changing everything. Brennan stirred, reaching for her in his sleep. Victoria nestled against him, perfectly content in the knowledge that sometimes life's greatest blessings came disguised as its greatest disappointments. And sometimes, the hand that reached for yours in your darkest moment was the same one you were meant to hold for the rest of your days.